So now we're going to go into each of the yamas and the niyamas one by one. Okay, we're going to start with Sutra 35. So in your book, the new book, it's 122, page 122. So Sri Patanjali explains that each of the yamas and the niyamas, when you have practiced this, there's a certain result that comes about, which is actually quite life-enhancing. So we start with ahimsa. Ahimsa means non-violence. In the presence of one firmly established in non-violence, all hostilities cease. For a person that is truly living and breathing nonviolence, when you come into the presence of such a person, your hostility ceases. I'll give you an example. Have you ever seen a newborn baby and held a newborn baby in your arms? That is a pure, most vulnerable being. And there is no violence, just being and gentleness there. All the inner hostility inside of us just melts away when we're in the presence of a newborn baby. That vibration is what is carried. So our job to be able to practice ahimsa is to live and be that, carry that vibration with no hostility, no irritation, no anger. Now think of somebody who is quite a violent person and notice when you're in that person's presence, how that makes you feel, right? One of the, okay, I don't know anybody's political beliefs here, but I know that a lot of people have a negative reaction when they see Donald Trump on the screen, right? Now look at that vibration, right? You just look at his face and people get riled up reactions, right? So you can see the difference between a newborn baby where there is absolutely no violence in that baby's vibration and somebody who has. Now those are polar opposite extremes. When you're in the presence of a guru, what is the vibration that you get? If you're in the presence of somebody like the Dalai Lama, who practices loving kindness in all that he does. I was super blessed in my life to be in the presence of Mother Teresa. When she had her mission in Hong Kong, my father and my family had actually donated a significant amount of money. I think they actually bought the property or put the down payment for the property that the Missionaries of Charity are in Hong Kong. And so we were very lucky because we got to meet Mother Teresa. I remember when she walked into the room, first of all, she was a force. She's tiny, she was so small, but she was so energetic and so bright and so full of love. And I couldn't help it. I started to cry uncontrollably and laugh uncontrollably. And she gave me the biggest hug and it was just so special. And I was like, like so overwhelmed with all of that. She carries that vibration of non-violence. Why? Because her whole life, her mind, her heart, her soul is dedicated in the name of service. Same with Swami Satchidananda. I had a very different relationship to him because he was like a grandpa to me. So I was very lucky. It was quite a casual, informal relationship growing up. So there was never this kind of magnificent, oh my goodness, he's this big guru. I never had that, I don't know, fear. I wouldn't say fear, that's not the right word. But there was not that wall between us. It was just, it's Gurudev. Let me go up to him and give him a hug and chat to him. There was no formality there. But it was only after he left the body and I went very deep into my meditation that I actually started to realize just how amazing that man was as a teacher, just how incredible he was. So when you are established in nonviolence, now what does it mean to be nonviolent? Most of us don't go around punching people. So we're all okay from that perspective. But violence can happen in your words. Violence can happen in the way you treat people. Are you impatient? Are you hostile? Are you judgmental? Are you harsh with those around you? When you are tired and impatient, do you cut your family or friends or colleagues down because of your impatience? If you're stuck in traffic and somebody cuts you off, are you hostile and start cursing? All of these are acts of violence, especially thoughts in your mind. If you judge or hate or insult with your thoughts, anything that has to do with hostility, impatience, and judgmentalism, feeling better, superior, entitled, all of these are acts of violence. Shutting down somebody's conversation, interrupting people, all of these are acts of violence. Minimizing, manipulating, guilting people, all of these are acts of violence. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, uh-oh, maybe I'm not as nonviolent as I'd like to think I am. So I'd like you to actually think about it, reflect on it, and how can you cultivate this nonviolence? Well, start with something small. Start with something really, really small. If you drive in Hong Kong, keep your road rage in check. Keep your road rage in check. If somebody cuts you off on the streets as you're driving, stop before you curse out loud. It's easier to catch the word than it is to catch the thought. So let's start with the words first. Don't say anything out loud. Don't scream or swear out loud. And then work inwards towards the mind. Say, okay, this person is really in a rush. They are so in a rush that they are not aware of other people around them. But I am a yogi, and I would like to be aware of other people around me. So I'm going to drive with kindness and courteousness, and I'm going to let people pass in front of me. That's one, such a simple, small way of bringing nonviolence and cultivating this nonviolent attitude. Look at all the people you judge. Swami Satchidananda taught me as a kid, if you point the finger in blame and in judgment and in accusation, actually look, there were 3 fingers pointing right back at you. So think about it. Before you blame, before you accuse, before you point the finger at anybody, look at yourself first. And when you cultivate nonviolence, and now this also happens in how you treat the environment and all other living creatures. I know a lot of vegans in the world of yoga use veganism saying, this is my practice of ahimsa. But what if you're not vegan? What if you're on a ketogenic diet? What if meat is a big part of your life? Find a way to lessen the violence there. Eat kosher, eat halal. Eat in a way that allows you to know the source, know where your food is coming from, and choose companies and practices that resonate with your values. Again, this is a slow, gradual process. Remember Sutra 28, by the practice of the 8 limbs of yoga, the impurities dwindle away. So let this be realistic and achievable and attainable. Because the second you give everything up, you'll maybe last 3 days and then it'll all come back. It's impossible to practice it all the time at the same time. So choose your battles wisely and pick just the 1 or 2 things that you can do to lessen the violence in your life. So if that means that, so I'm a vegetarian, I'm not a vegan, but in my practice, I have lessened my intake of dairy. I actually no longer drink milk, and I've completely transitioned over into plant-based milk. Cheese is a little bit of a weakness, and cheese is something that it's easy to eat when you go out with friends. So fine, I minimize my consumption while I have control over my environment. And then I go with the flow to keep a peace of mind when I'm outside of that control. And there's no point in constantly fixating your thought, oh my God, I'm in breach. Oh my goodness, I'm in breach. Oh my goodness, this isn't perfect. Perfectionism is actually a defense mechanism and a form of hostility towards yourself. If you are too much of a perfectionist, you're not going easy on yourself enough. And this is what makes it really tricky. This is what makes it very, very difficult to practice nonviolence. One wonderful way of practicing nonviolence is to ask yourself this, especially when you are in the heat of an argument with somebody, particularly your partner, because it's always usually the people you live with that causes the biggest amount of friction. Do you want to be right, or do you want peace? And sometimes it means letting go of the need to express your opinions and your principles. Stop, be quiet, and just listen to what somebody else has to say and acknowledge it. There's a beautiful author called Marshall Rosen or Rosenberg, and he talks about NVC, nonviolent communication. And it's the same principles. Most of the violence we have happens in our exchanges with other human beings. It starts with the art of deep listening. So today, I'd like all of you in an interaction with somebody to deeply listen to them, be it a child or a partner or somebody on the phone. Deeply, deeply listen. Listen with your full awareness and with an open heart. And then acknowledge what you have heard from that person. What I have heard you say is this. Is this correct? Now, if you have heard correctly, yes, that person would have felt heard and understood. If you misunderstood it, that's a way to clear up misconception. It's totally a way to clear up misconception. And then go one step further and try to understand what a person is feeling behind the words that they say. I know in you saying this, you are feeling frustrated. You are feeling angry. You are feeling hurt. And then see what vibrational changes happen in that exchange. That is how you remove hostility in difficult conversations, by listening and acknowledging. And even if the conversation is a hard one and you have no solutions and you have no answers or anything no resolution, you can still have that fundamental respect. It's the concept of agreeing to disagree, but just by saying, oh, let's agree to disagree, that can be very patronizing. There's no heart and soul and connection in that. when you open your heart in connection with that, despite being in disagreement with someone, all hostility ceases. And it's okay to acknowledge this is a really difficult conversation because you and I will not see eye to eye on this. And I can understand your perspective. And I can see where you are coming from with regards to this. I fully understand it, but I still don't agree with it because where I'm coming from. And a lot of the frustration is people don't take the time to see the other person's context. That's the biggest thing. So many times my kids, my husband and I will be bickering a little bit back and forth. Yeah, but. And then my daughter will come in between us and be like, hello, you guys are talking about the same thing. What are you arguing about? You're both saying the same thing in different ways. And both of us will stop and say, actually, you're right. Thank you for translating that. That's the beauty of kids. They're like genetically mixed between the two of us. So they get both of us, right? That's why they're so special. So this is nonviolence. I'm going to send on the WhatsApp group at the end of today a little handout and a worksheet. And I'll also put it on the online course as well, so you can download it and have it on your computer, of all the different ways that you can actually start to play around with and practice Yama and Niyama. Just by little, for 1 week, try this and then see what happens. So do we have any questions about Yama, about nonviolence? Okay, so I have a question. I'm going to read it out loud. How to deal with a husband's violent noise from movies? It's one of the key things I argue with him about. Right, violent movies. Well, that's a big one. Not always easy. Not always easy to deal with. So if it is invading your privacy, you have to come up with a specific need and not say, your movies are driving me crazy. You choose the words very carefully. The sound from these movies are very loud and very jarring, and my peace of mind gets disturbed. Now, I fully acknowledge that you enjoy them, but the noise disturbs me. So can we come to some sort of arrangement where you have time to enjoy your movies, but I also have time to enjoy some peace and quiet? Because we can't change anyone. We can't impose our will. You're not allowed to watch violent movies ever again. It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work. So I grew up loving horror movies, and my husband absolutely despises horror movies. And so we made an agreement that if I were to watch a horror movie, I would watch it with people that enjoyed horror movies, and that in a way that he wasn't present for it. And likewise with violent movies, I said, okay, you can absolutely watch violent movies. But if we're in bed and you're watching it on the TV and I'm trying to sleep, use a Bluetooth headset to watch it, and I'm okay with it. And I'll put an eye mask on, or you can watch it outside, or choose another day and time to watch it, right? He loves all these Netflix shows that are all action-packed and crime and suspense and drugs. That's what he likes. It's what he likes. That's who he is. So we've come to an arrangement where it's in respect of each other. So yes, I'm not ever going to deny what he enjoys, because again, imposing that and denying it is also an act of violence. Not allowing somebody to be who they want to be is also an act of violence. Repressing somebody else's personality and always constantly trying to change, it's just going to cause frustration. You can't change anybody. You can only change yourself. So express how you feel. Express what the need is. Be very, very clear in that need. Be very straightforward. Being clear is kind. Saying what you mean and meaning what you say is kind. And kindness is the biggest form of nonviolence. Loving kindness. Okay, so we've got another question. I'm just going to pull it up. Dealing with anger. How to process intense emotion in the moment without causing harm. That's a really good question. Thank you for asking. So if you look at anger, it's a very useful emotion. It's a very, very useful emotion because it moves energy. It requires a big uprising from inside of you, a large and loud expression, and then there's a calm. And what that anger does is it allows to shift stuck energy. So anger is a very, very useful emotion. And if you look at it from that perspective, you can understand it as a very useful tool. But if you are hostile, hostility and anger are two very different things. Hostility is one way where people show their anger, but it's still very passive aggressive. And you don't really get any result out of it, because who does that internal stewing and boiling and anger affect? It actually affects you inside and actually doesn't affect anybody else outside, right? So somebody may know that you're angry and irritated, but they don't necessarily know why you're angry and irritated. They don't necessarily know what they did wrong or what it is that has caused this anger and hostility. And so again, it's the way to express it in a way that doesn't point the finger and blame. I read this wonderful book that actually, it's called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. And I actually started using it on adults. Oh my God, it works even better on grown-ups. So it's really great, because if you lose your temper, they say it's okay to shout if you've lost your temper. It's okay because you've lost your temper. But instead of saying you are like this and you are like that, you lose your temper about something specific. I have asked 3 times and I still see this, like, something like, oh, well, mine is, my bed is not a hamper for wet towels, right? So I'm yelling, I'm angry, but I'm speaking about something concrete that I am seeing, right? It's this. Now, most of the time our anger is because we've got the last situation and the situation before that and the situation before that all lumped together. And it's all been repressed. And so when we really get angry, it's not just what you're angry about in the present moment. It's this and what happened before and what happened before and what happened before. And it all comes out in one big bleh. And this is a result of repressing and not working through difficult conversations. And it happens. None of us have been taught this growing up. None of us have actually been taught, how do you relate to people? It was only in my university that I took a class called Human Relations and Values. And it actually was a class that specifically teaches you how to communicate with other people, how to listen to other people, how to understand other people, how to manage conflict resolution. And yes, it was in the context of an HR position in a corporate world, but the way the class was taught was so heartfelt. So when you are angry, and that anger is not used consciously as a tool, right? So I can be angry and I can yell, and then I've dropped it and I've been able to let it go and I'm back to calm. And the anger is not stewing inside of me. And then I've also had moments where I'm stewing and I'm agitated and there's no peace there. So the first step is, if you are in that internal stewing of anger and you feel you haven't been able to express it, first be clear within yourself exactly what it is you are angry about. Because it might not even be about something as mundane as the remote control. It could be something that is just a trigger of something much deeper. Find out what it is exactly what it is. And then try something different. So my kids and I, we have these fun experiments, right? And like I said, I'm speaking about this in the context of, I'm a human being, I'm a mom, my patience gets worn thin. We're all sharing internet and a space together. And I'm trying to run a business, and my kids have all their online schooling, and they're kids. And it's all very overwhelming. And so I have these conversations with my kids. Okay, if mommy loses her temper because I've asked you to do something 3 times and you don't do it, obviously I'm going to start raising my voice. But you have told me you don't like it when I raise my voice. So what can I do instead? And then they said, okay, come up with a code word. So they came up with a silly code word. And literally all I had to do was say the code word without yelling. They'd have the same reaction as if I was yelling. So again, it's a collaborative process to figure it out. And it's not going to be easy, but if you're willing to rumble with it, Brene Brown calls it rumbling with vulnerability. Being open to showing your weak spots, especially with the people around you, because actually, when you are vulnerable, you are actually very, very strong and very, very courageous, right? Courage is not the absence of fear. You're feeling the fear, but you're pursuing it anyway. You're feeling the fear and you're triumphing over it. So in the case of feeling angry, there's a whole bunch of tools: meditation, mindfulness, yoga, running, breathing, jumping, journaling, crying, talking to a friend. First, you have to be clear in yourself. What are these emotions and where this anger is coming from? And try to get to the root of it, so that if it needs you to communicate with somebody to resolve something, you are very, very clear in what it is that is in breach of your value system, what you need, what you want, maybe a suggestion on how to change, and what you need from somebody. And Marshall Rosen, read his book. It's Nonviolent Communication. It's a great book. And it really, really takes you step by step on how to work through very difficult conversations, especially with people that you feel so angry and hostile towards. A lot of the times when we're angry at other people, we're usually angry at ourselves as well. We take it out on other people, but really it's because we realize that actually, we could have done a much better job. And I'm really just angry and disappointed in myself because I wasn't able to fulfill what I said I was going to fulfill. But in order to understand our anger without repressing it and getting sick as a result with high blood pressure or hypertension or heart disease, it's important to unpack it within ourselves. Okay? I hope that answered your question.